To assemble a square roof that has 4 triangles, add a joining strip to the right side of each triangle, and then just use a butt joint to match the corners up and join each of the sections together, and leave it flat to begin with. Once you have this all joined, make sure you give everything a good burnish, and then release the backing from this last piece of score tape, and you can just simply fold these sides together and make a final butt joint to make the square roof, and of course burnish that on the inside. To make a rectangular roof, again add a joining strip to the right side of each piece. Make sure you've alternated a triangle with a trapezoid going across, and then you'll need one other joining strip that is cut the length of this short side, and just line that up on the top there. And then, I didn't say this for the first one, but make sure on your triangle pieces that the base is on the outside. And then again, we'll just use butt joints to put the sides together. Then once you have the sides together, I've released the tape backing on my 2 joining strips. Now here we can't put this flat, but we'll just take these 2 sides and just kind of kiss them together, matching up their corners and points. And then reach in here, and this last joining strip at the top, make sure you have your roof joined up here properly, and then you can reach in and give both of those joins a burnish. And then check to make sure that you can still read the letter designation so that you'll know which building the roof goes to for all of your roofs. And then just repeat this process for the remainder of the roofs. And when you're finished putting your roofs together, you'll have 12 roofs, 1 for each of the buildings. Now once you make all of the roofs, you'll want to put them on the buildings, of course, and you'll soon see that there are only 3 roofs that can go on without being trimmed in some way, because those buildings stand taller than the buildings next to them. And K, of course, is the tallest here, and then N and D. Now those 3 roofs we can just put to the side because we don't have to do any trimming. Now all of the other roofs will have to be trimmed or notched to fit around the surrounding buildings. 2 things that will be helpful in this process will be a pair of very sharp, kind of thin detailed scissors. That makes it easier to cut these slanted pieces. And then I've also cut a piece of medium weight chipboard. I've cut it exactly a 1/4 inch wide, and this one is 4 3/4 long, but you want it to be at least 4 1/2 inches long. And I just have black because so you can more easily see. This is just used for measuring, so it can be whatever scrap you have around. Now here, as you can see, I'm working with a set of undecorated buildings. When you do this step of trimming the roofs, you will have already decorated all of your buildings and have them attached together. Now the process is the same. I'm just doing this for demo purposes. The thing that will change, and it will vary depending on how thick your decorations on your walls are, is the length of the measurements that we take for the notches, but the process is still the same. So I've zoomed in so that you can see this process a little better, and we're first going to look at building M. Now building M is a 2-inch square building, and the roof is 2.5 inches square. So that means there's approximately a 1/4 inch overhang on all 4 sides. We can see here that M abuts L along this back edge, so there's no room for that 1/4 inch overhang, so we'll need to trim that off. But when we get right here to the corner, we really would like that overhang to continue. So when we get to the corner of the triangle here, instead of cutting straight across here, we'll cut down right there. We'll leave a little 1/4 inch. So let me show you what that looks like. So I've just used my little 1/4 inch chipboard spacer to trim that off and draw that little line down here. And then also down at this end, we need to just cut a perpendicular line, a line perpendicular to the base edge that meets our 1/4 inch on the back. So I'll go ahead and cut those out. So that's what the trimming looks like. Here's our notch for the back, and I've also cut this corner off back here, and we can just put that in place and try it on for size. Now when you try it on for size, make sure you look at it from the top, from the sides, and the front, and make sure that it's fitting the way you want. Or you may need to trim the notch a little bit deeper in some cases. Now let's look at another example, building J. It also happens to be 2 inches square, and the roof is 2.5 inches square, but the rules we use for measuring, it doesn't matter what size the roof is or the building, we always measure the same kind of a way for the notches. So here we can see in J, we need to cut off the entire left side and the entire back side, and we learned how to do that kind of when we did M. But here we've got kind of a notch to go around building E, so let's look at that first. We'll need to take a measurement of the depth of that notch, and if you've got any thickness of decorations here where the roof line is, make sure you account for that when you're making your measurement. Now, for example here, mine measures 5/8 of an inch. Now remember that there is no overhang in the back, but our roof here that we have has an overhang, so we need to account for that. So when we have this 5/8 of an inch here, we'll want to measure and add a 1/4 inch to allow for that overhang for the size of our notch. So if our measurement was 5/8, then our notch would be 7/8, and we would measure 7/8 from the very corner. I'll measure 7/8 there and draw a perpendicular line, and then I'll just use my 1/4 inch measuring to cut that notch. Mark and cut that notch there. Cut off this back side completely and cut off the left side as well. So I'll go ahead and get that accomplished. So I cut off those pieces, and now I have this roof shape that we can try in place. And it should fit nicely around building E over here and come straight down over here. Now if you need to do any additional trimming, go ahead and do that. So we should be able to follow those steps for all of the other square buildings, and even for building C. Let me turn that around here. C is very similar to M that we did. You can see it butts right up here against D, but we have that little 1/4 inch corner there that we want to keep. So we'll do that for C. So let's look at roof H. Now for roof H, we can see that we need to cut off the left side and then cut off the back side here, all except for the corner right back in here. Let me put this paper up here, and then I think you could see it a little bit better. There's a corner that we can keep there. And then the roof will overhang here, but it needs to be notched around building N. So let's measure here and see how much roof we need to leave. Now for me, that measures 1 inch. So remember, whenever we're measuring these notches that are butting up against a building, we have to add 1/4 inch. So I'm going to measure 1/4 inch along this short side here. 1 inch and 1/4 along this short side. I'm keeping that. This is the side I'm cutting out because you can see we need to have overhang back here, but we need to notch around this building out here. So let me mark this and then I'll be back to show you. So here's our marking. I've got the notch here. We're leaving this part of the roof. We're also leaving this little back corner here, then cutting the rest of this side off, and coming up perpendicular to the base on the front here to cut this side off. So here are my initial cuts, the notch here, along the back, and the side. Now when we go to test fit this in, it may be necessary to trim a little bit more off of these sides just because we're trying to wedge this in this time. And I can see right here that I need to trim off just a little bit more. It's not going to fit down in there. So I'm going to trim equal distance off my 2 sides and see how that works. So after I trim just a smidge off of both the left and the right sides, this roof can now fit nicely on building H. Now for building I, just think about it in 2 stages. First, kind of look at it with building K. Measure the width of building K plus its decorations, and when you go to put that on the roof, make sure you leave the corner here 1/4 inch back and then start your measurement for K. And then on this side, we just need to measure the length here of this notch. Remember to add your 1/4 inch on that side. So I'll show you what that looks like. So here's roof I. I have a notch here to go around building K and a notch here for D. Now when I measured D, I looked at the measurement of I, the end of I to the end of D, and I added 1/4 inch and then measured from the corner down here to get that slot. And then that'll fit over there. And again, if you need to trim anything off a little bit more to make it fit in between these 2 buildings like that, go ahead and do so. So once you've made your cuts, I suggest that you take a marker that coordinates with the decorative paper you'll be using and go around all of the edges. And when you're finished cutting all of your roofs, they should all fit on their buildings nicely and sit level and nestle right against the adjacent buildings. And now we're ready for decorative paper on our roofs. In this section we will make the chipboard templates for cutting the decorative paper for the roofs. Now we have 3 different sizes or widths of chipboard here. The 1 5/8 will be used to make templates for the roof pieces that were cut out of 1 1/2 inch wide chipboard. The 1 7/8 will be used for those roof pieces cut out of 1 3/4, and the 2 1/8 will be used to cut out a template for the roof pieces that were cut out of 2 inch wide chipboard. You can see, I think, that we've just added 1/8 of an inch to the width in each case. So let me zoom in here a little bit and we'll get started. So I'm starting with my 1 5/8, and the first thing I'm going to do is draw a line along the length here that is 1/8 inch up from the bottom, and measure that line carefully. So now that I have that line drawn, I'm going to turn it this direction, and I'm going to mark a line in 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So the first template we'll make is our triangle shape, and we'll again reference this chart here that's at the top of the 3rd page of the cutting guide. And remember that our 1.5 inch wide chipboard roof pieces were for C and K, and that the short side here was 1 1/2 inches. Now we make the template basically the same way that we did the roof pieces. We add 1/2 inch to the length of that side. So our base of our triangle is still 2 inches. The difference here is that we're going to measure that 2 inches from where we drew the 1/4 inch line, and we're going to make the tick mark on the 1/8 inch line. So I've lined up my 1/4 inch line here with a 1 inch line on my gridded mat, and then I'm just going to mark my 2 inches on the 1/8 inch line. And then remember, the top center is half of the base, which would be 1 inch. Again, I'll measure over from this 1/4 inch line and make a tick mark. Now I'll connect that tick mark up here at the top with the one I made on the 1/8 inch line, and I'll extend it so it goes all the way to the edge of the chipboard. And then on the left side, I'll connect this tick mark at the top with the intersection down here, and again continue that line all the way to the edge of the chipboard. So here's my triangle drawn out, and we're going to want to cut just on these angled lines. And if any of these other guidelines will confuse you, just go ahead and erase them so you know exactly where you want to cut. And then I've marked the letter designations for the buildings this template will be used for, and I've also made a mark down here at the bottom to indicate the base of the triangle. So for the trapezoid, I'm going to flip this piece over. I'm going to orient it so that the straight corner here is on the left side, and then I'll draw 1/8 of an inch line up from the bottom and 1/4 of an inch line in from the left. So now that I have those lines drawn, I've lined up my chipboard with a 1 inch mark on my gridded mat. And then to see what length we want to cut this trapezoid, this is for C. The length of the side for C is 2.5. Remember, we add our 1/2 inch, so the base of our trapezoid will be 3 inches. So again, I'm going to measure over from the 1/4 inch line and put a tick mark at 3 inches on the 1/8 inch line, not on the bottom edge, on the 1/8 inch line. I'm going to take that mark and also make a mark up here at the top at that 3 inches. Now to get the top of our trapezoid, we use the same angles that we did when we cut the triangle. So we measure 1 inch in on the left from the 1/4 inch line and 1 inch in from the right. And that will be, we'll connect these dots. Again, remember to extend to the edge of the chipboard on this side as well as on the left, and on the left we go through that intersection. So I'll make those lines. So here's our trapezoid marked out, and we'll cut on those diagonal lines. And again, if any of these other lines will confuse you, just go ahead and erase them. And now you can see exactly where to cut the trapezoid. And then I've marked the trapezoid with the building that it pertains to. And those are the 2 templates that come out of the 1 5/8" chipboard. Here I have the 1 7/8 inch piece of chipboard, and as I think you can see, I've already done my preliminary marking at 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, and I have that lined up here on my gridded mat. And out of this piece of chipboard, we need to get one triangle piece that we can use for all of the buildings that are 1 3/4 inches of roof height, and then we also need a trapezoid for building H and building I. So let's start with the triangle, and here building A, we can use that as our reference. The length of a side is 2 inches, so the base of our triangle we know would be 2.5 because we add that 1/2 inch. Again, we measure starting at the 1/4 inch line and then coming over 2.5 inches, making a tick mark on the 1/8 inch line, and then 1/2 of 2.5 is 1.25 inches. So I'll measure starting with the 1/4 inch line and come in 1.25 inches. Connect these dots extending to the edge of the chipboard, and on the left side coming through that intersection, and cut that piece out. Now, just like we did in the last set of templates, I'm going to flip this piece of chipboard over and move it so the square end is at the left, and make my markings for the 1/8 inch line and the 1/4 inch line. Once I have those markings, I look up here at H, and the width of the building was 3 3/4. We add 1/2 inch, so that would give us 4 1/4. I'll mark that starting at the 1/4 inch and put that tick mark on my 1/8 inch line. Then I'm going to move that over, that tick mark over, so that it lines up with a 1 inch mark, and transfer it up here to the top. And we need to mark our angles for to create the top of the trapezoid. It's the same angle we used for the triangle, so we'll measure in 1.25 inches on the left, starting at the 1/4 inch line we marked, and then we'll measure in 1.25 inches on the right with this, using this tick mark here as a starting point. Connect our dots coming through this intersection over here, and we'll get our H template. Now for our I template, we need to square off one corner. I'm just going to use this one over here and come as close to this point as you can, because we will need all of this real estate. So I've squared off this corner and I marked my 1/4 inch line, and for building I, the side length of the building was 3.5, so we'll mark 4 inches on our 1/8 inch line, transfer that up here to the top, and then measure in the 1.25 inches on each side, remembering to start at the 1/4 inch on this side. Connect our dots like we've done before, and this will be our I template. So those are the 3 templates we need out of the 1 7/8 chipboard. Now from the 2 1/8 inch chipboard, all we need is a triangle, because the 3 buildings that we cut with 2-inch high roof pieces are all squares. So the length of a side on those buildings was 2.5. So we'll measure 3 inches over from our 1/4 inch line. Again on the 1/8 inch line here, and then half of 3 is 1.5 inches. So I'll just mark that tick mark up here at the top, connect our dots, and this will be our template for E, L, and O. So now we have all the templates we need to cut our decorative paper. Here are 2 methods for adding decorative paper using the templates we just created. On the left, this roof, I've added finishing strips on the 4 corner edges, and I've just trimmed them off even with the bottom. Then I can just use my template and cut pieces of decorative paper that I can use to go on all the sides. And you would follow this method on a rectangular building as well. The only difference is you would have one more finishing strip across the top piece of the roof. Now, whichever method you use, you will find that the decorative paper hangs over the edge and will need to be trimmed, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The second method does not use finishing strips. Instead, on the triangular ends, we add tabs, and these tabs can fit over like so. And then if you had a square roof, you would have 2 triangular pieces on the other side, and they would not have tabs. There's no need for them. On a rectangular roof, you'd have one trapezoid with no tab, and the other trapezoid would have a tab so that you'll get a nice finished edge on the top. So let me show you how to cut these tab pieces. Now this is our decorative paper. I'm just using cardstock for demo purposes, and this would be the wrong side of the paper. So I would take my triangles and hold it back from the left edge, a little bit more than 1/4 inch, and you can align the bottom edge directly on the edge of your paper. And then carefully trace on 2 sides, on both sides, and then use a scoring tool to come right next to those edges and score. Then remove your template and use a ruler to add a 1/4 inch tab to both sides. Now those tabs can be squared off at the top of the triangle. We'll repeat that process for our second triangle. Now once you've drawn 2 triangular pieces that have tabs, if this was a square building, you could just trace around the triangle 2 times more, and you would not add any tabs or need any scoring. Now, in the case of the ones with tabs, it's obvious which side is going to be the base. For when you trace around the 2 triangles without tabs, make sure you make that mark on the inside so you'll know which side is the base. Now, if you have a rectangular building with a trapezoid, one of the trapezoid pieces will just trace exactly around, no scoring needed. The second trapezoid We'll still trace all the way around, but we're going to add a tab just at the top. So once you've traced around, leave it there. Use a scoring tool right along that top edge, and then use your ruler to add a 1/4 inch tab to the top. So here's my 1/4 inch tab on the top of my other trapezoid. And then just cut out using a straight edge and your craft knife on all of the outside edges. And wherever you have a tab, go ahead and fold and burnish with your bone folder and add some score tape on the tabs. So here are the 4 pieces that have been cut out, and we're going to start by adding the 2 triangular ends. Now you can use whatever adhesive you want on the inside of these triangles. I'm just going to use some glue stick so that the process moves a little more quickly. So make sure you line up your top, your corners. Get everything aligned where you want it. And then fasten down your tabs. And repeat that on the other triangle end. Now if this was a square building and we had 2 triangles, we would just add adhesive to them and put them on the other 2 sides. Since this is a rectangular roof, I'm going to first add my paper that has the tab on it and put that up here at the top. And get everything burnished down. And then I can finally add my last plain trapezoid on this side of the roof. Now whatever method you use, once you have your decorative paper attached to the roof, you'll need to trim it off even with the edges of the chipboard base here. Try to keep it right on the edge, especially if you've cut any notches. Now I find this easiest to do just with a sharp blade in my craft knife that I can hold up right next to that chipboard and just go around all of the sides and any notches you have. Once you've got all that trimming accomplished, just put the roof over on the building and make sure that you don't need to do any additional trimming. And then once you have the decorative paper on all of your roofs, if you want to add any additional embellishments, you can see where you could do so and they would show the best, or especially not interfere with any of the other buildings or roofs. And then once the roofs are decorated as you wish, go ahead and take your glue and run a bead of glue around the edges of the top of the building and put your roof in place. Make sure that you check from the top and all the sides to make sure that it is sitting nice and level and flush the way you want it. Once you've attached all your roofs, your village will be complete. During the rest of November and the first part of December in 2016, I will be working on each of the buildings for my version of the village, which will have a Christmas theme. I'll be posting pictures and details of my progress on my blog, and I've included a link to the blog in the description below. And once my entire village is completed, I'll upload another video so you can see my version of the completed project. I hope you've had fun making this project or just seeing how it all comes together. This is April with Craft Knife Chronicles. Thanks for watching and bye for now.